16th, 2020. This is our notice has been given of a budget workshop meeting of Commissioners Court of Grimes County to be held this date at this time. We are in the Grimes County Annex Building at 114 West Buffington Avenue in Anderson, Texas. Agenda item number 1, this meeting has been called to order. Agenda item number 2, discuss and review the Grimes County FY 2021 proposed budget. So that's where we are at. Commissioner Mallett gave me a call this morning to let me know he would not be in attendance for the workshop. So just let the record note that there are 3 commissioners and myself present for this discussion. And speaking of this discussion, I've had a call, and the call was in regards to the minutes that were taken for the last workshop. And our county clerk, Ms. Brzezinski, this is nothing against you. If anything, it's a positive against you and your department, because the minutes that were taken and then submitted from our last workshop were very thorough and complete, comments and so forth. The question that's been put in front of me is, do we need that thorough of a documentation of the minutes, or could the comments or the minutes be a little bit more summarized, I guess with bottom line information versus, I really don't know how to say it.
I know what you're saying though, and I get it, and I try not to be too detailed, but that's the only record we have of that meeting,
Yeah.
because it wasn't even recorded.
And in some instances, I feel like it is important to know who said what, so we go backtrack when the auditors have the question.
Correct.
So you can leave some of my curt comments out, that would be okay. But,
Well, I try not to put those in, but yes.
but anyway, commissioners, I have all of you, Commissioner Cox, did you get to read the minutes from the last workshop?
I did, yes.
Commissioner Dominski, Commissioner Walker?
I did.
And myself. Matter of fact, what was it, 4 or 5 pages
It was
of minutes?
11 pages.
11, oh, it was 11. Okay, that's because it was front and back. All right. But it was 11 pages of minutes, and I'm not saying that's too many, but I would like to have a consensus from the commissioners as to what you guys would like to see, you folks would like to see in relation, because in one respect, we can save the county clerk a lot of energy and effort, but also we want to make sure that the record's correct. Ma'am.
Not to go too far into this, since this is not an agenda item, and perhaps it should be.
Well, I think it's setting the stage, Commissioner, for the minutes how they're taken in this workshop, so.
Well, she keeps really good notes, you know, just, so I would like to venture into the past on how things were done and how it came before Commissioners Court, and if it to approve the minutes and how we're doing it now. So I don't know if I would be going too far. Do you think I'm going too far to go into that?
I would say if you're going to talk about how the minutes would be kept of this meeting, of this budget discussion, that would be fine. But the general discussion, certainly if you're going to take some action as a court to vote on how to do things or ask the clerk to keep records in a certain way, I would suggest that's probably better for an agenda item.
Agreed.
Okay. Well, maybe an agenda item, because you know, as in the past, it was always put on the agenda to approve the minutes, because they are legitimate records, legal documents, and it's pertinent that they be concise and that they be you know, a reflection of the action that was taken by this court. So
Well,
maybe
we can put it on the agenda. We can have that discussion then on minutes and procedure and process overall.
Yeah.
On today's workshop minutes, is there a preference of how we would like the county clerk to record our discussion today?
I think if we're recording, as we are today, it can be a summary of what we said and did, because you have the recording to go back to. Now, I understand why she did that day, because we didn't have a recording, and we didn't have Facebook going. So we didn't have any record other than her notes that she wrote down that day. To me, that would make sense.
That's reasonable.
And I would like to add that workshop meetings are a little bit different than regular meetings because we're not taking any action, we're just
Right,
discussing.
yeah.
So that's why sometimes the workshop minutes are a little more detailed, just because, like you said, if we ever need to go back and reference a meeting, we can. If all I said was we discussed this and nothing else, then nobody's gonna know what was discussed.
Vanessa, excuse me.
Yes, ma'am.
You know, you and I talked about it a little
Yes,
bit
we did.
yesterday.
Mhm.
I think there's a way to do it, you know, that you reach a happy medium, because when you go back and you read about the guidelines on how you take minutes for a meeting, although it's a workshop, you know, every he said, she said, should not be put into a permanent document, you know, like that. I feel like what you presented is more or less your notes that could be summarized,
Right, no, I get it, yeah.
you know, but not
That can be done.
what I want to say, the sarcastic comments like Mr. Walker made last week.
Yeah, we took that out.
And all of that kind of stuff, you know, it should not be he said, she
That was a
said.
factual statement.
Yeah, but no, you know, and you have to be, when you go into it, to me, it has to be accurate and concise.
Yes, and
And
that's
it-
why I always send it to y'all to look at, to get y'all's feedback on, because, you know,
And I
we
guess-
all have a different view of things.
That's it right there, and that's my concern. If I'm calling you saying this, and he's calling you saying that, whereas when we're a body, we can make a decision together, and you hear us all at one time.
So you're talking about bringing it back to court to approve?
To
each
agenda
time.
item, yes,
Okay.
so that we can,
We'll discuss that.
but, you know.
We'll get that on an agenda and we'll have that discussion.
All right, thank you.
All right, so as we move in, and that was an appropriate conversation, but that was also a good 10-minute stall trying to get the auditors in here because I want them to hear our discussion.
And if you need to take a
Because
recess.
we are very close to, I think, coming to conclusion and finalizing what we want the auditors to indicate on our proposed budget so that we're in preparation to approve or disapprove it. I'll say approve it next Wednesday, which is September the 23rd. So Court, do you want to take a recess until the auditors are available?
We can.
Is that an agreement? All right. We're going to recess. It's 11 after 9 a.m. And as soon as the auditors can join us, which I hope is sooner than later, we'll reconvene. This is a budget workshop. We have been in recess since 9/11, I believe it was, and it is now 9:31, and we're going to reconvene this meeting to have discussion on the Grimes County 2021 budget. So with that, Commissioners, you have a hot off the press, up-to-date budget, I'm going to say, right, Jesse Murphy?
Yes, sir.
With all the latest changes, additions, subtractions, of things that we've talked about and discussed. I don't know if it's best to let you commissioners just start asking questions or sharing observations. I know none of us have had a tremendously long time to look at the new budget. However, I will say the vast majority of it has not changed, just some particular areas that we have talked to the auditors about. We want to do this, we want to add that, we want to subtract that. Those adjustments have been made, so what's reflected before us is what we're currently dealing with. And Jesse, are we still in a minute excess of monies that we have put over into the capital projects budget. Can you tell the court how much that amount was? Best you recall?
About 35,000. On page,
30, 48? Is that it?
on page $33,621.09.
And you're where at, please?
48.
Page 48.
Okay.
At the bottom.
Okay. So that's where we're at, commissioners. We dismissed the last workshop. I think we were just all somewhat brain tired, and we had discussed a lot of items. We'd taken things out, put them back in, taken things out, put them back in. And I got to the point of where I gave a summary of some additions or things that we had talked about. I think it's like 6 items, and I can review those if you wish. But then we asked the auditors to go ahead and put those numbers into the budget. Jesse, have we made any additional changes to the budget that you become aware of after the workshop? Adjustments that you may have made?
So I did add in grants, the grants that we are anticipating on receiving.
Okay.
You'll see changes in those funds, Fund 80, Fund 40.
And those are road and bridge grants, are they not?
Disaster grants.
Yes.
Combination of the COVID and road and bridge, the CDBG.
Okay.
Also the Chapter 19.
Before you get off the grants, Harry, since you're here, just to make that, you stay seated because I don't want you to fall on the floor. But those grants totaled how much, Jesse?
That I budgeted for.
Yeah.
Oh, let me.
Was it about $750-something thousand? 59 or 89 or?
We budgeted, as far as revenue
Yeah.
goes, 1.8 million. And
If you go to the total page on
I know, it
56,
says 4 million.
What I'm getting at, Harry, in preparation of next year, when we go through this fun exercise again, we have rolled from the 2020 budget monies to 2021 budget because we know that there's no way you're gonna finish those projects and get those invoiced in the 2020 numbers.
No, that's right.
Okay, but I just,
Those are not in Fund 80. That is in his Fund 20.
okay, but I'm I'm making the comment, next year, I don't think the court will be in the mood to accept next year's budget for the year after, for 2022, at least at this point, because we are rolling money from this year to next year.
See, I never see that money that's, talk about it in the revenue account, that's just a wash.
Okay.
For us, that's just a wash. That
Okay.
never come into play, except that we have a small percentage matching that we have to do.
Right.
It's about 6% right now. But, yeah, if we're getting, we have multi-million dollars of grants allocated to us already.
Yes, sir.
But that doesn't show up in the Fund 20 account.
I think you're talking about mixing two
Yeah.
different things together. So
Okay.
Fund 80, there's 4 million budgeted in Fund 80. Those
Okay.
are for the disaster grants, COVID grants, disaster, the CDBG grants, all of those. That's separate. When you mentioned about the EMP, did you mention EMP projects just a minute ago?
That was the terminology I forgot, but that's what I'm talking about.
Okay, that is in his budget, and so what you're referring to is, you kind of combined both of those. You combined grants with his actual budget, and so that's where he's coming from when he makes that comment, or statement. The EMP projects, what he's basically saying is we're increasing, we discussed this at your office, we're increasing your budget to cover those projects.
Correct.
Because it was budgeted in this year, but it will not be invoiced and finished until fiscal year 2029. So
Right.
we are increasing your budget, but to know that in the following year, in fiscal year 2022, that will come back out. Your budget will decrease by that $758,000.
Until we have more EMP projects.
Correct.
The process will go
Yeah.
on.
The process will go on,
Right.
but in that specific, in these two specific projects.
Yeah. No, I understand. We have
Okay.
contracts that have been awarded that won't be completed this year, that money will be rolled into next year's budget.
Yes, and it will be coming from fund balance.
Aware of that.
Okay.
And you said that amount is about what?
758, is that correct, Terry? 758,706 is two projects.
That was the number you gave me.
The 204 was
That's
five.
the 700,000. The grant projects are several $1 million.
Yes, those are two separate items.
What page are you looking at that on?
Which part?
So what you're talking about?
The fund.
The 758, that's Fund 20.
Do you know what page it's on?
I can find it for you. Page 33. Page 33. At the bottom, his 4601, then, not 4601, I apologize, 4602, resurface paved roads.
Right.
You'll see where it's increased to $861,000.
Okay.
$572,706 is for the County Road 204, and that's a reconstruction. Correct me if I'm stating that. Okay. And then 2490, 4600 is special projects. We increased that to $311,300. And $186,000 is because of County Road 323. They have the money in this year's budget because they anticipated on those projects being completed this year, but it's not gonna be completed until next year. So we're.
Because we put a stop, I put a stop on, or we at the Corps put a stop on Road and Bridge, and then we released that. And by the time we released that, there was not enough time to finish it in this calendar year. So we have moved the funds to 2021, and Road and Bridge will be able to complete those in the next couple of months. Did that answer your question, Commissioner Cox?
Yes, sir, I just wanted to see them.
Sure. Okay. Jesse, is there anything else that you want us to,
So we can just do a quick rundown of the changes that I gathered from September 8th meeting. The building maintenance salary, we've adjusted to 60,000. And speaking of that, his job duties, responsibilities have changed. So I believe it'll be placed on next Wednesday's agenda regarding
Right.
the grade.
correct?
I'm sorry. That was with the employee from Road and Bridge, or who?
Building maintenance.
Building maintenance, okay.
We discussed about, well, in addition to the changes for Road and Bridge, it was also instructed the last meeting that we were changing 4601. We were reallocating those funds. 4601 was gonna be 442,000, and 4602 was gonna be 289,000. That was $6,000 increase from what was originally budgeted in version C. So we reduced his tires and tubes by $6,000 to cover that change. added the part-time person, the part-time clerk for $13 an hour at 20 hours a week.
There's no burden on that, is there?
There is.
There is?
There's no insurance.
Right.
Which is the bulk of the burden, but there is burden.
Do you know what the percent is on the burden?
16.3,
16.3?
16.37%.
You couldn't round that to 16.4?
You can if you'd like on your notes.
Okay.
We're doing actual.
I've already come doing that. We also replaced 2 of his light equipment operators
Right.
with 2 CDLs. And you'll also see that on page 33, you see where his 2 light equipment operators are zeroed out, the positions.
And Harry, on those, your comment last time, I think, is that those guys were not able to get their CDLs and they were gonna stay as light equipment operators, but you had other people. It's not an addition of people, it's a changing of functions
We have 2 vacant light equipment operator slots right now.
that these guys will go to,
Well, they're already light equipment operators.
okay?
But in order to drive the trucks we anticipate buying, they would have to go to a CDL driver position.
Yeah,
They have not either been able to or been willing to attempt to get their CDLs, so they will stay as light equipment operators. They'll no longer be driving trucks, they'll be patching potholes and things. Those 2 vacant light equipment operator positions go away, and we're increasing the number of CDL driver positions by 2.
okay.
We're not losing any personnel.
Right.
Their duties are gonna change.
Okay, I'm sorry, Jesse, go ahead.
No, that's okay. We reduced 427.4505, that is voters' equipment, by $120,000 on the anticipation of receiving that from the COVID grant.
What department is that again?
Voters?
It's 427, 0427. We've increased 0431, the fire department run costs. To 35,000. Sheriff's office, we reduced the machinery and equipment by $100,000. We added a new line item for capital lease. And we budgeted $69,860.16. That includes maintenance.
Could you repeat those dollars again?
69,860.16.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. We budgeted the $4 million for Fund 80, the grant funds. That's your CDBG and your COVID. And we also budgeted in Fund 40 for the elections grants.
Which is 140 or 120, what is that amount?
Ma'am?
For elections grant?
Oh, for the elections grant?
It was 120 and 40. I mean, 120 and 20, wasn't it?
It's 144. Now, we're not budgeting for the revenues because we received it this year.
Right.
We're budgeting the expense and they'll come out of the fund balance. So you have approximately like 144,000.
Mhm.
And then we also budgeted 4,900 for chapter 19.
pretty nice we got that grant and we already got the funds for it, so.
And that's not normally how they
No.
are normally are reimbursed. Yes.
While Al is here, can I go back to page 48 and ask the question?
Yes, ma'am.
Under the Harvey disaster money, where it says Commissioner Precinct 3, that 1,294, is it,
What fund is that? 47, 37,
47?
47?
It's zeroed out, and I just,
No, it shouldn't be.
It's, no, I haven't had an opportunity, we had a meeting set up yesterday at 10. I had to cancel on him, because we had other meetings came up that took precedence, so, that is not, we have not had an opportunity to sit down and go over that. We were planning on doing it tomorrow, after this. So either way that goes, it will be changed. We just have to go over the numbers.
Yeah, there's gonna be insurance money coming in probably next week. And then we still have a grant outstanding in there.
So bottom line on that discussion, there's, at the end of the day, we're still gonna end up with the same budget numbers.
Your revenue and expenditures will increase, but they should offset each other.
Okay. That's what I'm getting at.
Yes, sir.
We're gonna get money, we're gonna give money, but at the end of the day,
It
the
should.
bottom line stays the same.
It should.
Okay.
We're gonna meet and discuss that.
okay.
That answer your question, Commissioner Walker? All right, Jesse, go ahead.
That's all I have. We did, in regards to our department, we did have our Zoom hearing this morning.
Yes.
And
And I'd like to announce that, if I may,
Sure.
that Jesse Murphy has been moved to the position of auditor for Grimes County on the date of, or a day before, I don't know, but as our current auditor, Mary Nichols, leaves us for, I would say greener pastures, but you're going to New Mexico. As our current auditor leaves for different landscape, and we wish you well, that Jesse Murphy is now going to be put in that position. So, Ms. Murphy, congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Ms. Nichols, congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay? All right. So then you had a Zoom meeting today, go ahead.
We have, because of the timing on the vacancies, we have a little extra funding in there for this year. We would like to, we talked to the district judges and we have someone in mind and I believe they would be able to start on the 27th, 28th. And so we'd like to be able to bring them in, even though it's only 3 to 5 days. We'd like to bring them in before October 1st, before the vacancy, or before the position is vacated. And the district judges did grant us that.
Okay.
So that's what we'll be doing. It will not cost extra funding. We'll be able to cover it.
But I had asked you to ask them, because we have gotten notice from another employee who's going to terminate
Yes, sir.
from employment. Did y'all address that this morning? Because the request was, we have an employee, MJ has turned in her notice, where she's leaving at the end of October. So we have a candidate that we're bringing in for Jesse's replacement, because Jesse's replacing Mary, but we would then be short MJ's position. And my request to Jesse Murphy, in their discussion with the district judges this morning, let's get permission to go ahead and bring somebody in as quickly as we can find a viable candidate, not wait until the incumbent terminates, but get somebody in to ride the coattails to see what's been done, or however our new auditor distributes the work. but I don't want them to run shorthanded any more than they already have this year, because we've got a lot of things going
Oh,
on.
my goodness.
And a lot of things to keep up with. So if we brought someone in for an additional month, or just say we won't get them in quick enough, okay? But I guess if you you interviewed between now and you hired somebody, they're gonna give a 2-week notice. We're only talking about probably 2 weeks of additional pay. Do you have enough money in your salary bank to cover that?
So those are different fiscal years.
Ma'am?
Those are different fiscal years. You're talking about 2 different fiscal years.
Right.
So the answer to that question for the second person would be no. We don't have the funding to cover that because what we budgeted for next year is covered under what we're all currently being paid.
Okay, so how much would that cost us to bring somebody in for that 2 weeks or 3 weeks? And if you can give us that number, do I have the commissioner's permission to take that out of fund balance or whatever account we need to cover that 2 weeks of duplicate pay? I think that's important.
It is, it's very important. My goal is to get this new person in and to be the one to train and sit with MJ. Right at the moment, after thinking about it a little more, Judge, and I didn't have time to meet with you this morning.
I know I feel left out, but
I'm
go
so
ahead.
sorry. We don't really have the space nor the computers, and I have confidence in the person that we are bringing on that she will be able to handle and sit by MJ and learn what she's learning or learn what she's doing. And when the time comes and we do have this space to bring in that additional personnel, that they will be able to train the new one. And so it's going to be difficult, but I believe that we will be able to.
So it's your position to let the vacancy occur,
Yes, for her.
All right.
Yes.
and then we'll just bring somebody in as quickly as you can, and space would then be available
Yes,
after
because
October
by the time we
31st.
post it and by the time
Okay.
we do interviews
All right.
and all of that, we'll be close to the end of August.
Well, I was trying to be a nice guy,
I
and
know you were,
didn't
and I
want y'all to
appreciate
be underhanded, and with you in your new position, I didn't want you falling short of any of the
Yes,
capacity.
and I will definitely come back to the court if that changes.
Okay.
So, but at this moment,
All right, then disregard that request, commissioners, at this time. There is another request, though, from Road and Bridge. Harry, you had a email that you sent requesting an increase in mechanic pay of where you had an incumbent, you were paying $16.81 or something. They terminated, they resigned, I shouldn't use terminated. They resigned their position. You have had an ad for 1, 2, 3 months
3 months.
and haven't gotten an applicant, and it's your desire to increase that position by $2 an hour or somewhere along that line. And if you did, that still stays within the current category, correct?
That's correct. What we're asking to do is increase the budget to accommodate the funding to pay that person more than, or if we can find someone to hire, to pay them
Right.
more than the minimum for that position and possibly more than the previous employee was making. Right now, if we don't have an increase, we can't pay them any more than that. At that rate, we haven't seen any interest in the position.
Do any of your other accounts have any, I'm not gonna use the word fluff, but do any of your other areas have money that you believe that you could potentially close a little watcher or hold off where we could make that adjustment to a salary without having to make an adjustment to the bottom line of the budget?
We do. Last time I reported, we had just opened our fuel bids, and the total estimate came in about $216,000. What I didn't pick up on at the time, that fuel bid includes the fuel for the sheriff's department.
Oh,
It's in the bid package, but that does not come out of our funding.
Right.
That comes out of their funding.
right.
So we have some excess in that line item. I think the budget calls for $215,000 in that line item. So I had suggested that the $4,000 plus the burden and everything for the $2 an hour increase in mechanics pay come out of that line item.
Jesse, how would that work? Would that work okay with your,
We can, yes,
okay?
whatever the difference, we'll just decrease this fuel line.
Do you think you might be able to pick somebody up with that increase in pay?
I hope so.
About
We-
$2, right, Harry?
Yes, ma'am.
I hope so. We have struggled to hire people this summer. Now, quite frankly, the unemployment is paying more than we can pay people with the extra funding that's been added to that. And
Hasn't that run out now? Didn't that run out September 1 or?
I think the.
You did.
The
The
bid
600.
ran out.
600 did, 300's running out the end of the month.
Okay.
Yeah, I think if it hasn't run out already, it's running out soon. We're hoping that that'll spur some people to get off their hands and try to come back to work. But it's been a tough hiring environment, quite frankly. I said earlier, we have 2 light equipment operator positions open that have been open for a while now too. And generally, those positions are pretty easy to fill because they require the least skills.
I'm not trying to discredit the title of diesel mechanic, but your mechanic isn't somebody who really takes an engine and tears it down and rebores, and
No.
you're more belts and batteries and loops and all?
The major, rebuilding of engines and transmissions and things, we have done by the vendors.
Right.
Whether it's, Caterpillar or whoever, they're much more suited to do that. We do, probably the most critical thing, that our mechanics do, their ability to diagnose what the problem is
Oh,
and
okay.
determine if it's something they can replace themselves or it's something that needs to go to the shop.
Okay.
So, yeah, we do the things we have the capability to do, without having a transmission and 1,000 pieces on the shop floor.
Yeah, okay.
So that just isn't effective.
So instead of the $2, you want to do 19?
Pardon?
You want to move them to 19, not
Be
2?
about 19.
Okay, so $2.09.
And again, that's just putting the money in the budget. Until we find somebody, we don't know what we're gonna be able to hire them for. But I don't want to be restricted to that previous employee's salary level.
Right.
Okay.
And we may have to go hire to find somebody for that position.
Jesse, do you have I should have what is the top of that salary?
20.
Is it 20? Okay, so if you got to 19, then you're pretty getting close. You still got some flex. All right, thank you, Harry.
Thank you.
So, before you, Harry, I've got a question, just to clarify, you wanna raise the mechanics pay from 1681 to 1881 by reducing what line item?
Fuel,
He wants to raise it to 19.
Oh, 19.
rounding off to 19, but, the fuel line item, the fuel's been one of the bright spots this year. Gasoline prices are down quite a bit, and it's reflected in our budget. But like I said,
And that figure will be also covered in next year's budget, correct? The 19 rather than the
yeah,
16?
if we're able to hire someone, that salary level will carry forward.
Does that answer your question, Commissioner?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Anything else? Thank you, sir. Any other additions, Jesse? Or is that the end of your list? Mr. Treasurer, Jim Bob Tranum will put you on the hot seat real quick. Have you had an opportunity to look at your budget? Because I know it wasn't a budget that you submitted. Have you had an opportunity to review and feel that you're pretty comfortable with?
Reviewed it and had a little bit of discussion, within the office, and we're perfectly fine where they stand right now.
Good, okay.
Okay, we're not gonna cause any trouble.
Even better, okay. But I did, since you hadn't had an opportunity, I wanted to give you an opportunity
No, thank you for that,
to,
But we're good.
okay.
Good.
And I won't ask Mr. Foltz because he's already had his shot at the apple. So. And his annual reduction was appreciated. Let the record show.
Thank you.
So commissioners, at this point I'm done. I think the auditors are done. Do you have any requests, any concerns, anything that we need to? Otherwise, I'm going to ask the auditors to make a final run with the changes that we've addressed, which isn't going to be much different than what we have in front of us. And then that would be the budget that we're going to present next Wednesday for approval.
I have one
Okay.
item to discuss, but I have a question first. On that additional run money for the fire departments, does that have to be approved in Commissioner's Court?
Well, when we approve the budget, we would be approving that.
Okay, because I know it was discussed in the workshop, but I didn't know if it had to be an official.
Well, we couldn't approve it in the workshop, and we can't approve it in this workshop, but what we have done for the fire departments is we put $35,000 in a pool, or in a pot, and that amount has been submitted for our 2021 budget, and the plan is, at the end of the year, those fire departments that were called out through dispatch for a run,
Right.
where they were toned out, we'll take however many runs that is for the year, we'll divide that into the 35,000,
Okay,
and that is how much we will pay per run.
okay,
We did have a number that the auditors put together for us, that the average runs over the last 5 years for all departments, excluding Navasota, was 704 runs was the average. So I ran it to 700, divided that into 35,000. That came out to $50 per run.
right.
Okay.
Which is what the
So,
recommendation.
and we had that amount, so we put that amount into the budget.
Okay. And that'll be effective October 1.
It would be effective October 1 for starting to keep track of the runs, but it's
Keeping
not
track.
going to be payable
Till
until the end of the year.
When you say the end of the year, do you mean the end of the fiscal
The
year?
end of our budget year.
Okay, so the next, okay. And then, is there gonna be new contracts? Will that be in the new contract for
It
each
will
fire
be in the new
department?
contract, and
Okay.
we have only had one fire department come in and present what they requested, and we've presented what we've requested and required. And I did float the $35,000 pool past him, that chief, and he was in agreement with that. He said, well, it's better than what we got.
Right, okay, I just wanted to make sure it didn't have to be brought before court as an official action.
I'll take council's advice on that.
What's that do?
You weren't intently in tune to our discussion?
No, I heard all of that. I didn't hear the last question.
The question is, do we need to take the specific item of having a run pool agreed or approved by court versus approving it via the budget?
You're deciding what terms are going to be in the contract that is going to be signed by the departments and the court?
Well, we said we're putting a $35,000 run pool,
Yeah, I
and
understand.
we're putting in the contracts that how that's gonna work.
Right, I understand. That wasn't a question. I was saying you're putting a term in the contract.
Yes,
That $35,000 pool is part of the contract.
yes,
It is not now currently part of the contract.
that is correct.
So it would be the court, the contract is between the court and the department. So it seems to me the court needs to approve what terms the court wants in its contract.
So
Okay.
does that mean when the contracts come up to be approved, then that would be when you would approve it then, right? Or have
She's
they
asking
already
two
been
different-
approved?
I think
They
she's
don't have
talking
to
about two
accept the
different
contract.
Right, I
We're
understand
just
that,
put-
but
we're
if
setting
they
aside money
do,
in the budget in the
it
event
has to
that
be
they.
brought to court, yeah.
This money today, we're talking about putting it in the budget
In
that's
the
being
budget, yes.
proposed.
In anticipation
Okay.
of it being in the contract,
Yes.
right.
Okay, but I also want to make sure that I'm hearing, and for the benefit of what I thought I heard you ask. When he was discussing the 700 divided by the 35,000, and it was worked out to be $50 per run, but that's not what he's saying. He's saying by the end of the year,
Right,
correct? You will take the number of runs and divide it into the 35, and that's what
That
the
was just
runs
an
will be
estimate.
paid, not, because I don't want it said that we
So
paying
it's not gonna
50.
exceed the 35.
This is just to get, the pool is not gonna exceed the 35,000. The $50 number was thrown out there just to give them an idea of what we were talking
Okay.
about.
But I guess where I'm getting at is at some point, these fire department contracts will have to come to Commissioners Court, correct?
Sure.
And then at that point, when it's approved, then that run money will be approved with it, is what I'm understanding.
The
Is that
run
right?
money is already approved next Wednesday.
Yes.
It's already gonna be approved next Wednesday.
Oh, it is on the budget, I mean, on the agenda.
It's gonna be part of the budget.
Oh,
They
okay.
announced.
It's already, we have that 35,000 in this budget we're looking at.
Right.
And when we approve
The
that
budget.
budget next
Okay.
week, we're saying we have a $35,000 pool that we'd be willing to pay for runs in the event it's a part of the
I
contract.
just thought that y'all would be bringing these new contracts back to court to be renewed, I guess, with the additions and corrections that y'all made.
We brought this year's contracts through court, we bring next year's contracts through court,
Okay.
yes.
All right, and then the other item I wanted to discuss was my records management. And I know you and I talked about it on the phone, Jesse, because there's still kind of, you know, some question as to how much money that we need to put in there. And I know we had talked about that, but I just wanted some clarification.
Well, let's get some clarification today, because it's an agenda item for tomorrow, is it not, Cherie? So I'd like,
Next week.
ma'am?
I was gonna say tomorrow.
I mean, next week. Yeah, next week. It all kind of runs together. Y'all can calm down. Okay, but I'd like to have that discussion and know pretty much where we're at today, so that when next week it comes up as an agenda item, we kind of have the i's dotted and the t's crossed, and we know who's entitled to what. I was just testing to see if y'all were paying attention.
We paying attention.
I felt the oxygen leave the room. I'm like,
Waking everybody up.
I'm ready to
willing to
get,
be here, Judge.
yeah, thank you, Commissioner. We're willing to get, I'm anxious to get this done. What?
So, the plan, the archive plan is just a plan. Like, even though they approve the plan, you guys can approve the plan. If the funding's there, then she can go ahead with it. If the funding's not there, then the plan's still there for that year.
Yeah.
So I don't see why you would have to table it. We are in the process of, cleaning that up.
Right.
Those funds up.
Right.
And it will not be done next week.
Okay. Well, we did approve your plan, Vanessa, did we
Yes,
not?
you did approve the plan.
Okay.
And then
it-
I also had
and the-
two
but
proposals.
I'm sorry, but hang on.
I'm
And
sorry,
and the
go
plan
ahead.
is this much, okay? And we have the understanding with you that as long as the money's available, we're gonna let you do this based on what you wanted to do, and then this, and the next item, and the next item, correct?
Correct, until we run out of money.
Until we run out of money. And
Yeah.
you also shared with us that based on fees, you generally bring in about $7,000 a month on fees that's dedicated to that record retention or preservation, whatever the
Right.
account's called, correct?
Right, plus there's also a fund balance in that account in addition to that.
And the
as
fund
well.
balance is what y'all are working on, is that correct?
We're working on all. The way her system is set up, it has, we're working on tying her fees to the local government code in her system. And so we're reviewing what she currently has in her system, making sure that it's going directly to the correct account. Because if her system's set up incorrectly, then the treasurer's office is gonna receipt it according to what her reports print out.
Okay.
So it's all of it. We are working on all of it.
Okay.
But also, the archive fund is separate from records management. So right now, I'm just talking about the archive fund.
So Fund 54?
Fund 54,
Okay.
yes. And so that doesn't affect what you're talking about as far as the coding on the court's fees. That's a whole separate thing. That's records management.
We are still looking into all of your
Right.
records, including
Right.
that. So
Right, but that shouldn't affect Fund 54. I don't
at
think.
this moment, I don't have it in front of me.
Okay,
so
that's
I would
fine.
have to look.
But I'm only asking for like $25,000,
Okay,
so.
so that's on the agenda for next Wednesday.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, okay. I just want to make sure that there's an amount in there, because at the last meeting, they asked if there was an amount in the budget, and I
You
said
do have a
no.
fund balance more than the 25
Right.
in that fund, but if you're strictly talking about the one fee and the one fund,
Mhm.
then by next Wednesday, I'll get with you before next Wednesday.
Okay, because right now it's showing in the budget there's 66,786, which would be more than enough to cover the two projects that I'm bringing before court. So I just want to make sure.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Are you two good?
I think so.
All right, I'll ask again, is there anything else that we feel we need to discuss?
I have a few
Go ahead, Commissioner.
things to say. I want to back up to the enterprise situation or the rental lease. Not real sure that I have a full understanding of that. And I'm just wanting to run down through and get some clarification on some issues. So in summary, it's my understanding that Enterprise buys the car at the government rate. We drive the car and pay for the maintenance, or they pay for the maintenance, but for about a year, we drive a car that they bought at the government rate and change the oil, and they determine it at the time to sell, when to sell it. But they don't have to go through the auction process, they sell it through the wholesaler. I'm trying to figure out how, if they buy it at the government rate, they can circumvent the government requirement for auction and go out to sell it at the wholesaler price.
I have no idea.
Okay, so I'll ask the county attorney if he's got any input on some of these questions. Please jump in.
I don't know the answer to that one, I'll tell you that.
That kind of, I don't know how that works, but under the current proposed structure, if the court at the time, I think 3 years is being tossed around, and if that court in 3 years wants to get out of that contract, what is that figure? What does that cost?
Well, it depends on how many cars are in the lease program at that time.
So, but we've talked about there'll probably be 16 cars that are purchased or released, or we're going to acquire 16 cars through somebody in the next 3 years under this program. So how do we, if the court at that time in 3 years says it's not working out, we don't want to do it, what is that figure for getting out of that and replacing our fleet?
I think that they provided some figures for you on what it would take to get out, but I don't have that in front of me right now.
Okay.
You have your residuals on each vehicle, depending on if the interceptor or the administrative vehicle will have a residual. They've given an estimate on the residual value per vehicle, but it's all determined on the, I'll just say wear and tear, or if the vehicle has underwent any extreme damage or anything. And at that time, according to their records, it's saying that with 14 vehicles, according to the chart that they gave us, we have saved in that year 305. But to say what would be left would have to be multiplied by the number of vehicles we have by the residual value.
Okay. So I know we're talking about Enterprise. Has there been any discussion with any other companies? I know that Enterprise is not the only ballgame in town, I'm assuming, with regard to fleet maintenance and vehicles. Has there been any other companies approach the county or discussions about looking into other companies that provide this service?
I have not been approached by any other company. I've been approached by Enterprise for multiple years. And, you know, I didn't feel like it was the right time. And then this year when they approached me, I told them, you need to talk to the county judge and or the sheriff's office. And I passed them off because I didn't, I had too much on my plate. I couldn't deal with anything.
Okay, so,
Does that statement answer, it says county cost to purchase 14 units with aftermarket is $527,289.
okay. So at the end of the 3-year term, if we terminated this according to the documentation that Commissioner Walker just presented, it would cost that court at that time about $500,000 to replace those vehicles. Okay. And so I have a concern, and it seems as though we are, as a court, as a county, severing some of our management responsibilities with regard to fleet maintenance, and that's just an observation and not a question. And another observation is that we, as far as outsourcing those responsibilities, have chosen with other departments not to do that. We've got a gentleman here, the building and maintenance director, who we could have very easily outsourced the maintenance of our new facility and other projects, but chose to keep that in-house so that we can control what goes on. We also do it with the IT department through Mr. Cannon, and at one point that was outsourced, and there's some questions about the success of that outsourcing. And I'm not real sure the amount of money that Enterprise is going to make on this. And I'm not real sure how we avoid the competitive bidding process on this, because I can't tell you how much they're going to make. And then another observation is, by approving this contract, if in fact we do, the court is mandating the sheriff's department to use this service for the term of the contract. And I'm not sure that that's the best practice to implement. It's not that I'm opposed to it, and I think they would do with whatever they had to do with right now, because they're in a position that we have the authority to make those decisions, but I don't know that that's the best thing for us to do. So, with all that said, I mean, Mr. County Attorney, going back to the first question that I have is, how are we doing all this when we have to abide by certain requirements, but another company can come in, piggyback on part of our requirements, and then circumvent the other requirements to profit on the deal?
I think it's a good question. I don't have an answer to that. I mean, how they use our reduced government rate and then they make a profit in the transaction, I don't have an answer for that. As far as the competitive bids, Jeff indicated that they were part of co-op or like the buyback board, they had already been subjected to competitive bids in another arena. I don't have great answers in that regard. I emailed the county judge of Waller County yesterday to ask how they internally justified not going out for bids on it, and they said they use a co-op, and I'm not sure what his statement to me in an email, we use a co-op. I don't know if that's like the Road and Bridge uses buyback board. I don't know if that's what was the implication or not. I'm not familiar with the co-op being used. I'm familiar with DIR, I'm familiar with buyback, I'm familiar with, there's, I think, another thing that Road and Bridge has used in the past, where a piece of equipment has already been subjected to bids. So I'm familiar with that, but I'm not familiar with the co-op. And I'll be happy to do my best to get a better answer, but I didn't get that information until, and this was in response to my contact with Jeff to say, how is it again that you're asserting that we can get around the competitive bidding requirement? He said that they're involved in RFPs as well as co-ops. Well, obviously, we haven't done an RFP here. So it would be that they had to have had their program subjected to competitive bids in some other arena, such that we could piggyback on that using, something similar to the buyback board. That's the best description I can give to you. But the entire process, you all have heard from those folks multiple times. I've heard many discussions, probably not all the discussions, and I've had my own discussions with them. The other question, your primary question, I don't have a good answer to at this moment.
So, from a legal standpoint, are we sure that this, I mean, you said you don't have a good answer, but.
Well, wouldn't be a participant if, not that I'm ever a participant anyway. I wouldn't be a participant if it wasn't legally permissible. But I feel like I need to get some questions answered on this co-op circumstance. But as far as the others concerned, to me, and I haven't asked the council for Waller County, if other counties and governmental entities are pursuing this, it would seem to me that they've probably determined that it's a valid arrangement. But I just have a lot of questions in my mind about how this actually plays out. And much of what's been said, and this is not necessarily a knock on them, but I'll say for the court's benefit, if this happened previously when we were dealing with CenturyLink, if I have somebody who's in front of me and most of what I'm getting is sales speak, I'm not comfortable with that. And if it can't be in speak that John can get, maybe I should, but I don't blame John, I blame the salesperson. So in this circumstance, it seems to me that if you've got questions that are out there, if the court, the majority of the court has questions that aren't answered, you need to get those answers before you take the action. I understand your concern about the next court being in a position to have to expend a significant amount of money if there's a termination. I also understand your concern about this being something that you're implementing for one department, and I made that comment previously, is you need to be sure you have buy-in from that department. That's an issue for you all to ascertain. I haven't talked to Chief Green since the last meeting, I guess.
I did text Chief Green because I felt like we were discussing his budget and that perhaps he should be present, so I don't know if he's coming or not.
Well, I don't know if he's coming or not, but I don't have any reservations in regards to the involvement of the sheriff's office, Commissioner Cox. We're not mandating them. They're the ones that brought this to us, and they've been involved in the discussions from day one. And my initial salvo to Chief Green was, look, if this is something you want to do, I'm willing to talk to them about it. But I'm not going to talk to them if you're not interested in going this direction. And he assured me more than once or twice that, hey, if this is going to save us money and get us newer vehicles, I'm okay with it. Now, he readily admitted, or I say he readily admitted, he said multiple times, this is not my decision to make, it's the court's decision to make. But from my perspective, we're required by law to give elected officials enough funds, or however you want to term it, to exercise their department. And we have done that in this case, and we've kept them involved. So from my perspective, I have no reservations of engaging Grimes County in this contract with Enterprise to help supply vehicles for the sheriff's office. So I don't have answers to all of your other questions for the exact numbers and all, but that comment or that observation on your part struck me pretty hard, and I don't think we're mandating. I think we're helping the sheriff's department and we're helping Grimes County to figure out a better way to spend the tax dollars. So,
Well, and I appreciate that, Judge, but I, respectfully, if we enter into a contract that mandates that they have to utilize this service, they don't have any other options. Unless the court is willing to pay whatever penalties that are assessed for getting out of the contract, or come up with more money to circumvent it and start buying vehicles until this contract runs out, but we're still gonna be on the hook. I mean, when we mandate, we're gonna buy or require them to use this service. You're in essence mandating that they follow this service, and that the court, by indication, is saying, this is the direction we're going and you have to use it.
I don't disagree with that. However, I will say that we've said all along, we're going to do this, and we're going to take a look at it at the end of the year. And if it's not a direction we want to go at the end of the year, we're certainly not going to move to the next step and bring an additional 8 vehicles in. We're going to take a look at, okay, do we end this contract and go ahead and buy out this initial application of 8 vehicles? Or do we just run the contract for the 8 vehicles that we have on hand until it expires? So, it's just something, yes, there's some unknowns and there's lack of experience on our part, but this is an opportunity to see, is this indeed a better way for us to help spend the taxpayers' dollars? So.
Yeah, and that's it. I mean, it's certainly well worth the discussion, and appreciate the seeking of alternative ways, but it's those unknowns that concern me. And I think, I don't think we've vetted this enough. I understand there's other counties and municipalities that utilize this service, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's the best decision for Grimes County. It very well could be, but I think there's too many unanswered questions hanging out there that potentially could put the county, even though we're trying to do what's in the best interest of the county, never deny that, but the unanswered questions are what could leave the county hanging out at the end or during with a big bill. And I don't, I would like to get some of these questions answered before we fully sign on the dotted line and even, fully implement this in the budget. It's not something that we could, if we decide it's something we need to do, then we certainly can come back and have those discussions at a later date. But I think right now, I'm very concerned about this particular program and how what the impact could mean to Grimes County in the future. Not to say it's going to be bad, I'm just saying there's a lot of unknowns, and even lawyers can't answer some of the questions. It's probably smart as well.
Just mildly competent lawyers maybe can't answer, I don't know.
I didn't say that, you did.
I would be happy before, if it's next week, not tomorrow, that the next meeting is going to be held, I'll be happy to do the best that I can to get answers to some of those questions. The issue of using the government's benefit as well as competitive bids, I will do my best to get you answers even before the next meeting.
Well, Commissioner, I'm going to say that you've had every opportunity to call Enterprise and talk with those folks, just like I have, or just like Todd Green has. And, I don't know if you've exercised that opportunity or not. It sounds like maybe you haven't. I've talked to 1, 2, 3 different county judges who do use Enterprise. None of them are long-term. They don't have the history that we're looking for of 4 or 5 years of leasing with Enterprise. One only started this year, one's only been with them a year, one's only been with them, I think that they're moving into their 3rd year. But I've taken the time to talk to those judges, and what are your thoughts? And one of them, he said, well, it's expensive up front. I said, okay, well, why did you go with him? He said, well, we looked at a lot of the other issues and the other concerns that we had. One of the observations that you have is, are we, I'm not using your exact words, but are we paying somebody else to do our job? Well, I think we ought to pay somebody else to do our job when we don't have the ability, time, and expertise, and sometimes the knowledge and history on how to do that. Your example of Mr. Peeler, using him versus Vanner. Vanner is a reputable firm, but Mr. Peeler is a reputable individual. He also has the educational background. He's a degreed engineer, and yet, in my opinion, this is just Joe Faust's opinion, but in my opinion, that would not be a good expenditure of county funds to go with Vanner when we have a qualified individual in-house. You referenced the IT. Utilizing an outside consultant did not prove to be the best way, so a court previous to you and me sitting on it jumped in, and I say jumped in, but they made the decision to allocate a certain amount of money to go out into the marketplace and to hire someone that had the skills and abilities of what the county needed, and that's turned out to be a very good decision. And as a result of that, the county has paid for that position over and over and over. I know that we've paid for it 4 times over at a minimum since we've had it on board. Now, we run this enterprise program for a year, and we don't get the customer service we're supposed to be getting. We don't see a reduction in maintenance cost, or our vehicles are tied up at dealerships for 2 weeks at a time. Then we start gaining some knowledge and some history, and we go, you know what? A year ago, we made a bad decision, and we're going to correct it this year. But if it plays out and it's a good decision, maybe we don't increase the number of vehicles that we start leasing, but maintain this initial contract just to get a feel for it. I appreciate your concern. I appreciate your questions and answers, but I'm going to go back to the fact that if we have to get everything answered 100% and have to know everything 100%, we might have just well quit, because we're not, this process already moves slow enough.
Well,
And you can't argue with that point.
we're budgeting millions of dollars of taxpayer money, and I think we owe it to the taxpayer to do as a thorough investigation. If it means getting 100% understanding of what we're spending money on, I think we'll get 100%. Going back to what you said about me contacting Enterprise, why would I need to contact them? They've had 4 times to come up here and explain this process to us, and I've asked those same questions, and either they can't or won't answer. I've asked the auditor the same questions. I'm not blaming them, but it's difficult for them to decipher. I've asked the county attorney the same questions, and he can't decipher, at least right now. I don't know, me calling them is not gonna do anything different than them continue to speak salesperson talk to me rather than give me the layman's discussion about this issue. I think the county attorney pointed it out, that if you're dealing with salespeople, it's their responsibility to make sure that the people that they're trying to do business with understand what it is they're trying to sell. And I don't understand this.
The only way we'll ever find out whether it's works or not is to go into it and see what happens at the end of the year. As the judge has stated, look at our maintenance, what we spend on maintenance. We obviously have newer, safer vehicles for our employees, that's a big plus, especially in today's times. So,
Will we be able to tell how effective this program is or efficient it is after 1 year, Ms.?
Personally, I don't think so, because your admin vehicles are only on a year. You're going to have equity in those. That's pretty much a given. Where the concern would be on my end would be the patrol units. That's a 3-year. And you're not gonna be able to sustain the 4 vehicles for the next 3 years. They're gonna need to add more. So you're gonna build on that. And really, you're not gonna see any, as far as repairs and maintenance, I would say that you won't see a decrease in that next year either. If you do, it would be a slight decrease. You're only talking about 4 vehicles. So I think you would have to, if you choose or you opt to do this, it would have to be a minimum of 3 years for you to even see. And at that point, Commissioner Cox does bring up a valid point, you're gonna have more vehicles at 16 vehicles. So it's not gonna be as simple as what's being discussed right now.
I mean, it's certainly in my mind something that I think warrants a little more investigation before we jump off the cliff wholeheartedly into this. I'm not saying we may find with further investigation that it might be the right thing to do, but I just think there's too many unanswered questions right now, and I certainly don't want to put the sheriff department in a position to have struggles down the road or even right now, because we don't know all the answers to the questions that we need to know. These are pretty simple questions.
Well, would you be willing to go over to my office when we adjourn from this workshop? We'll call it Enterprise, and you ask those questions again and see if you can get those questions answered?
Well, certainly be willing to go over to your office at any time, Judge, but I don't think they're gonna, I mean, at this point, I'd rather get the information from the county attorney's office. And then if we need to have further discussion, we can. I mean, that's.
Well, John, have you not been through the contract more than once?
I have, Judge.
Do you have any concerns about the contract?
The concern I raised was that paragraph 3C that talks about how the residual is calculated. And I think I've raised that before, and I think that question has been addressed. But the contract doesn't necessarily address, I don't think, and I could be mistaken, but the contract doesn't address what legal authority exists by which they can piggyback on the county's ability to get a governmental rate for the acquisition of the asset. I don't believe that's addressed in there, and that's one of the questions that I indicated to the commissioner that I would try to find an answer to. And then the other that is not addressed, I don't believe in the contract, is the competitive bidding issue. And that's the other thing I think that I committed to the commissioner that I would try to get an answer to.
But can I ask a question or make an observation? The monies that we put in the budget originally, because y'all wanted to buy, we're scheduled to buy vehicles almost every year. Maybe 3 vehicles, I think, at a time, 3 to 4 vehicles. That money is still in this budget.
Correct.
We just moved it to different lines.
Yes, we just reallocated.
So I guess until the answers are brought back from the county attorney, if that's what you're seeking to do, the money's still there.
Yes, ma'am.
You either acquire 8 vehicles or you acquire 3 vehicles by moving funds, but it's in this budget, right?
Correct.
It is. There was a $30,000 difference, and that is in Fund 49. So all we have to do is move it back to the sheriff's, yes.
So I guess until we can, everybody's comfortable with making the decision that we're making, the money is still in this budget, which is what
Yes,
we're
ma'am.
discussing today.
Yes, ma'am.
My only observation is listening to the discussion is, yes, many times we do take risk. We don't always know, but I think it's based on trying to do something for the good. More vehicles, newer vehicles on the road, our officers are safer in newer vehicles, and it's a way to gain more vehicles by going this route. Whereas we're talking now, how many vehicles this year?
30.
8? 4 and 4, right?
Right.
Well, yes, but
Well,
the lease
3 in
is
the budget.
8, without the lease is 3.
Okay. 8 in the budget now if we go with the lease, and 3 if we don't go with the lease, which it takes us longer. I think he said the other day about 13 to 16 years to replace our whole fleet. The thing of it is many times as a court, we make decisions for future courts that at that time they will have to make. As far as us budgeting or dictating or mandating to a department, our job is to provide a budget. I think at that time, I've seen over 8 years, we provided a budget for the sheriff department. If at that time, the budget is there for them to utilize, if they don't choose to go with the lease, then we will have to come up with something different, or we'll have to move around things in the budget to make it happen. But it's not that we're not supplying or we're cutting somebody's budget. The budget will be there if God willing and things remain the same. I think the overall intent was, from the judge's perspective, to make sure that we are putting our patrolmen and sheriff's office out on the roads in newer vehicles quicker. But you know, you either do it that way or you go back to the old way of doing it. I think I heard from Chief Green, they left the decision up to this court to decide which way, you know, they felt comfortable with us making a decision for their department. Am I correct, Chief? You're here, I asked you to come, if you want to speak.
You know, obviously, it's good. You're locking the court into a longer-term agreement, contract with some financial charges and stuff like that. You know, something obviously you got to bring to the court. If the court doesn't feel comfortable with it, then we'll go back to standard flow. If the court feels comfortable and it's a good deal and it's a benefit to the taxpayers, then we try the system.
Okay, so what back to my original point was, it's the money is still in the budget. I don't know how long we're gonna hash this out, but the money is there in the budget, and that's what we're needing to decide today, right? The budget.
Well, we want to get it to how y'all wanted to adopt it, I guess. So if you need a couple more days to, I think John said you could probably find out before next Wednesday. Then
Well, the money's the money. I mean, we've got the money in the budget.
The money is there as far as where it needs to be allocated
Right.
to, is all I'm talking about.
Or how we allocate it. We can change that after we approve the budget if we don't increase the amount.
You can, yes.
You'll either go from 8 vehicles or you go back to 3 vehicles. So. Just
Thank you for your comments.
we make tough decisions all the time,
I
and
agree.
nobody says they're always right. We try to make the best decision that we make at the time. And that's why we want everybody to feel comfortable. If the sheriff department, I mean, it seems as if we needed, we're not trying to put you on the spot, but, you know, you left that decision to us from the beginning. You brought them in, you've had them explained to us 3-4 times. So I am good whichever way it goes, because I know it's not always easy.
Just to address Commissioner Cox, so I don't put you on the spot with your chair in the middle and probably better than the corner. You're asking the court to use this program.
It's an option, yes. It's an option to the school.
I understand, but I'm saying this is what you're this is what the sheriff's office is asking for the commissioner's court, not the commissioner's court is. I know you're saying you guys do the homework and decide whether you feel okay with it. I'm saying most departments would come in and say, I've got this way, I think we can get a better fleet, I think we can get it faster, I think we can get it cheaper, I think we, and they would be saying, I want this, and I'm just saying, Commissioner Cox asked the question before you were here. He wasn't sure whether you were the one asking for this or this was a mandate from the court. I just wanted clarity of whether this is what the sheriff's office is asking for. Are you saying it's up to you guys to decide whether it's a better deal than the old way?
Yeah, we're just bringing options to the table.
Okay. Okay.
Like, no, I didn't hear the beginning, but, you know, when you talk about the competitive bidding and stuff, the question, and I don't know if you have it on the radar or not, is the sale of our vehicles going directly to them? Because part of the process is they're taking our whole fleet, would it be like a trade-in? Or do we have to?
Talking right now to what we have now?
Yes, yeah, because they want, say, 8 vehicles in exchange for.
The lease? Okay.
Yeah, and they're gonna sell those vehicles, and then that money will come back.
All of the money, or what will the fee be to them?
$475 per vehicle to sell.
Same as the rest of the term? It's the same as the rest of the term, right?
Yeah.
Part of their fee is to sell, right?
Yeah. Yeah, there's a $425 fee.
Okay, well, Judge, and you just cut me off, you need to cut me off, but the 2 questions that I told Commissioner Cox that I would go try to get better answers to, one, how is it a valid use of the government's reduced cost for this entity to obtain that for their benefit, for their profit? In other words, how do they piggyback and get the government's reduced cost? And then secondly, competitive bidding. And I got an email from Jeff yesterday telling me that they oftentimes participate in co-ops and other arrangements like DIR or buyback, those are not buyback, buy board. And so I emailed the county judge in Waller County, and he responded that they use a co-op, and the whole email was about 7 words, I think. I'm not sure what they use a co-op means. Do you have to subscribe to the co-op, or do you just get online and do what we do? And Harry's nodding his head. He would have more familiarity about our buy board use. But that's the question is, if you've got to participate in that thing, do we have to become participants of the co-op to be able to avoid competitive bids? I told Commissioner Cox that I would work to get those answers before the next meeting.
Yeah, and our plan is to use the Sheriff's Association of Texas vehicle procurement bid.
Okay.
They actually, the bids won't come in and won't be published till November 1st anyways. So that's the bid we're gonna use. So they bid everything out and identified, here's the vehicles and the dealers.
But our fee to them, do we know whether our fee to Enterprise is going to exceed $50,000 a year? Because that, to me, is, I see you're saying we're able to use this for the acquisition of the asset, but I'm talking about the payment to the Enterprise. If that exceeds $50,000, do we have to allow competitive bidding for other entities potentially to say, we offer fleet services as well? I'll see what I can find out. Any input that you guys want to provide me, I'm certainly welcome.
Is it not correct that if they're on buy board, he can bypass the competitive bidding?
Should be able to.
Typically, but that's when the county's buying. This is somebody else getting the benefit of the asset. We don't own the asset.
Absolutely.
So that remains a question of mine.
Absolutely.
All right, to move things along, we have money in the budget, whether we buy a vehicle, 3 vehicles, or whether we lease 8. We're all agreed with that. We're agreed that there are some questions that still need to be answered in regards to what Commissioner Cox has brought up, posed to the county attorney. The county attorney is going to do some research there. So we'll set the vehicles aside. Are there any other areas that we need to address in the budget, the proposed budget at this time?
I want to go on record as saying I had concerns about reducing the voters' budget by 120 to buy the equipment.
Okay.
Because we're basing that on reimbursement from a grant. But you addressed it last week by saying that if all else failed, we still have monies that we can look at from buildings or renovations or that type of thing, the lighting, the roadway, or this building renovations. So I just wanted to say I still have a concern there, but we've already built a budget around that reduction. And so I just wanted to voice that note. That's the only thing that I'm kind of stuck on.
Okay. Commissioner Dobianski?
I have no comment.
Okay. Commissioner Cox, anything additional that you'd like to discuss?
We are not funding another constable for 3 and 4. That's my understanding. That's not been included in the budget, correct?
That is correct.
And neither are we funding a health, I don't know what the terminology would be.
Authority.
Health safety authority person in the budget.
It's not proposed in the budget, no, sir.
I don't see anything else that concerns me.
If there are no other comments or concerns or issues that we need to discuss, this is a workshop. Does anybody in the audience have anything that they need to bring up? Hearing none, I'll go to agenda item number 3. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
Second.
I have a motion before the court on agenda item number 3 to adjourn by Commissioner Dobianski, seconded by Commissioner Walker. Is there further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? None. The time is 10:54.